You'll be familiar with the phrase, you get what you pay for, but when you hire a building surveyor, what really is it you're paying for, and how do you know you're getting value for money? I'm Tim Clarke, Managing Director at Harris & Clarke Chartered Surveyors, and I know firsthand how variable building surveyors' fees can be, both as a practicing professional and as a client, within a public sector role and as a consumer buying my first flat. Firstly, it's important to understand that building surveyors complete a number of different roles, and many surveying firms will charge different amounts of money for different types of services offered. For example, there may be some fairly straightforward services, such as preparing photographic schedules of condition, which can be completed easily with fairly minimal oversight by a graduate surveyor or newly qualified surveyor, whose hourly rate may be significantly lower than that of an expert surveyor or perhaps senior manager. With that in mind, you wouldn't expect to pay the same per hour for a basic schedule of condition as you would for an expert report, which you would like to rely on in court, as both require varying degrees of expertise. All surveying firms are different. However, we have four main ways that we can charge a fee to a client. These are broken down into fixed fee, hourly rate, success-based fee, and percentage fee. Some service lines can be fairly consistent and predictable, so your surveyor may be able to offer a fixed fee for instructions such as one-off inspections, where they are able to make a fairly good estimate of the amount of time to be expended. For example, we have a pretty good understanding of how long it will take to survey a two-bedroom 1990s semi-detached property, and conversely we know that it will take significantly longer to look at a 200-year-old 5-bedroom detached property with swimming pool and large garden. This is why bigger properties are more expensive to survey. Fixed fees are often beneficial for clients, as it provides certainty at the start of the instruction about how much they will end up paying their surveyor, and they will effectively be sharing the time risk with their surveyor. If the surveyor has to take more time than initially expected, this is no longer the client's problem. By contrast, with an hourly rate, which is normally what we would charge for instructions such as one-off defect inspections or for negotiating disputes, if this takes considerably longer than expected, then the client will bear that burden. Conversely, if we're able to wrap up matters in very short order, the client can benefit in a way they wouldn't be able to if they had instructed on a fixed fee. We certainly wouldn't commit to negotiating on a fixed fee anyway, as we are not in control of the other party's approach. You should bear in mind that being a building surveyor is not the same as being a solicitor or mortgage advisor, and for us to be able to complete our job, we have to incur travel time to get to site. This travel time will normally be built into your bill, whether you pay a fixed cost or an hourly rate. And so if you instruct a building surveyor that's 100 miles away from the property, rather than one that lives just down the road, it's likely that the further surveyor will be significantly more expensive. Sometimes on disputes such as dilapidations, we can agree a success fee with the client for either the value of money recovered in the dispute or the claim reduction if we're working for the tenant. This tends to be the exception rather than the norm, but we are seeing increasing demand from clients for this type of fee basis. When acting as a contract administrator on a construction project, our fee will typically be based on a pre-agreed percentage of the value of the building works, as this is often a good metric for the amount of time that we will need to spend on a project. In almost all cases, when dealing with percentage fees, there will be a minimum fee, which means that if you're asking us to oversee a very small amount of construction work, for example, our fee will end up being significantly higher as a percentage of the work than on a larger instruction. Before accepting an instruction for you, the surveyor should always send you written terms with very clear details of what they will be doing for the price that they have quoted. This is particularly salient in fixed fee work, but you might find that in hourly rate work, the surveyor is happier to be slightly more flexible in terms of the service they offer. For this reason, you should ensure that if there is a danger that the surveyor will need to do something out of scope on a fixed fee arrangement, that firstly they are willing to do so, and secondly, whether they will charge an extra fee for this service. As we operate as a business, it's almost always going to be the latter. Other additional fees to look out for are things like additional drone surveys, specialist testing, opening up works by others, or other consultants required for your project. If you think that you might be subject to these extra charges, you should always check with your surveyor before agreeing to let them proceed with the work quoted for. If you obtain more than one quote for your survey work, it can be difficult to compare the costs, particularly if you're not familiar with instructing this kind of work. You should read in detail what the surveyor is proposing in their fee proposal, as you might find that the cheaper quote excludes an area of work which will be significantly useful to you. Of course, it could simply be that the cheap surveyor isn't very good. This shouldn't happen, but it does. If you are struggling to compare your survey quotations, be sure to discuss this with one or more of the quoting surveyors, and they will be happy to assist. It's sometimes really difficult to know if you're truly getting value for money when hiring a surveyor, as often the only obvious differentiator is the cost. What you might not see, however, is the experience and qualifications behind that cost. For example, if you are instructing expert witness work on £1 million dispute, you probably want the most experienced surveyor in the company representing you, rather than the graduate surveyor or with somebody less experienced in the field they are representing you about. Particularly in dispute work, whether going through the court system or not, it will often be the case that if you go for a higher hourly rate, you'll get a greater level of expertise, which will in turn buy you a much more significant return on investment. A higher hourly rate could even cost you less overall, as your experienced surveyor will deal with your issue more quickly than somebody slightly less expensive. If you're purchasing a property, while price is not the only metric, as a guide, the more expensive your surveyor, the less likely they are to miss defects. So in short, there's not one easy way to explain why a building surveyor charges what they charge, but effectively it comes down to a number of factors, including time, geographical location, experience, expertise and overheads. Particularly with home surveys, you'll find that prices will often fluctuate if the market is on fire or if it cools off slightly, as many of the larger firms don't want to lay off staff. So now you're thoroughly confused. Put simply, if you want to understand why your surveyor is charging what they're charging, look us up and give us a call. Our details can be found at harrisonclarke.co.uk. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more property related content.